Hi, Del here with Healing Frequencies Music. And the topic of this discussion is about the power of our words. And I've had a lot of people asking me about words. How do you say things so that we can change things in our lives? I don't think that we realize how powerful our words really are. But they are not things that just happen instantaneously. What comes out of our mouth has been practiced for a very long time. Out of the abundance of our heart, what's in our heart is what comes out of our mouth. And we don't get things in our heart instantaneously. It takes a while for us to practice certain behaviors before we speak them out. And the way that I know for me that I found out what was going on here was if somebody said something to me and it triggered a negative reaction, I had to learn to think, okay, stop here for a second. What is going on? Why did I react in this negative manner? If I was willing to look deep enough, I would find a trauma or a frustration or a practiced behavior or something like that that led to that response. Most of the time, our instantaneous responses that come out of our subconscious are going to come from practiced behaviors. When I say practiced behaviors, that means things that we've said frequently over ourselves, things that we've read that we continuously allow to become a part of ourselves, things that we watched, that we have come into agreement with, that we have made part of our system. This goes back to the video that I did on propaganda. Propaganda is meant to put information into our brains that it just hammers a specific thing that literally goes into our entire system, and our body says, ooh, there's that thought. And it literally energizes your entire system, starting from the heart, and it works its way through our entire body. So let's say someone is constantly throwing negative words at you, which is in the case of verbal abuse. Anybody who's been in an abusive situation, whether it's a spouse, a family member, a boss, a coworker that constantly is hammering things at you, that is one of the ways that we come into agreement with negativity, because we have allowed that to come into our system. And you think, now, wait a minute. I didn't allow that to happen. I said the same thing. And one of my friends said to me, you had a part in the abusive marriage. And I'm like, no, I didn't. I didn't tell him to abuse me. And finally, one day I realized what I did was agreed. I came into agreement with the abuse. Now, it wouldn't have necessarily changed the situation because I can't change someone else's attitude. But had I not come into agreement with the abusive words and the abusive actions and the abusive stuff that came at me, then I wouldn't have been affected physically, because it caused something that was similar to chronic fatigue, which lasted 19 years. So as I begin to change my thinking process into coming out of agreement with the things that had been spoken over me, that's propaganda. Verbal abuse is a form of propaganda because it's coming at you constantly. Propaganda can come at you in any direction. And it's stuff that's aimed at you to change your mind about something. Whatever we have that is coming at us, that we're constantly listening to, and then coming into agreement with it, and then bringing it into our system, then eventually when someone says something that will trigger us, we're going to respond out of the frustration or the anger or whatever thing it is. So one of the things I always do with myself is the moment I have a negative trigger, I stop if I recognize it and I say, okay, what caused me to react in that manner? Then what I do is I take some time, whether it's right then or later on, and I just get into a quiet place. I put on some music or something. Some people might look at artwork. Some people might crochet or do some other creative thing where they can be in that place where they feel a complete rest and peace. Then I go into the garden of my heart and I just say, show me what caused that negative trigger. And it could be something simple. It could be something way deep rooted. Then the next thing we do, once we discover what that is, then we take the opposite thing. And a lot of times I always just repent. Repenting means that you just turn away from it and say, I own this action. And I'm just going to say, I'm not going to do, I get rid of it. I want no part of it. That's basically repenting. And I am going to accept this other thing in its place. So let's say I'm really fearful about something and I don't want to be fearful about that anymore. And it's going to come at me quite a bit because I've practiced being fearful about that thing for quite some time. So now I have to turn around and practice love in its place, which means I'm going to have to start practicing that. Practice love, practice love. And I send waves and waves and waves and waves and waves and waves, and then more waves of love at myself in whatever area that is to override that fear. I have to start practicing a different way of thinking. Then eventually the words that come out of my mouth will line up so that that first impulse that I have will be what I want it to be, not what just comes spewing out of my mouth. And as I've said before, my dad used to always tell me, even though my dad's still alive, when I was a kid, he would say, make sure your brain is engaged before putting your mouth in gear. Because not everything that you're thinking needs to come out that mouth of yours, which is true. Just because, and I talk about this in the free speech one, just because we have the freedom of speech as an American doesn't mean you got to say it. Sometimes it's better just to keep that shut, you know? Because we think that our opinion, everyone has to hear our opinions. That is not always the case, because sometimes that hurts other people and it hurts ourselves. I have a blog post which talks about reprogramming our DNA, which I will put in the link below. It takes 7 years to completely override your entire system because every cell in your body replicates itself, renews itself every seven years. So from start to finish, if you start changing your mindset at the beginning of a 7-year period, by the end of 7 years, if you're continually practicing overriding the negative with something that's of the opposite that's positive, then you're going to find that there's not going to be as much sickness in your body and you're going to be in a much better emotional state. And I say this, I really believe that every illness has an emotional root. If you can find out what the root is of whatever illness we have and work on changing that mindset of the trauma or whatever it is that caused the illness, then the illness goes away. And I'm a living example of doing that. As I say, I can't give you something I haven't done myself. I lived 19 years of my life with something that's like chronic fatigue. And I had to retrain my system to think a different way. I did that through words. So if you are sick or you know someone who has a sickness and you're writing me saying, well, will this music work for this? Will this work for that? If you pair your intent with that for the purpose of a specific healing, you take the music that feels good to you, whatever music that is. I tend to say instrumental music. Music with words already has the intent there. So find music, and I have a ton of it all over my YouTube channel. Just look around this channel, listen to some music, and if that music feels good for you that day, say, oh, this song really makes me feel at peace. And you put that song on, you get into that meditative, quiet state, and then you just start speaking over yourself. I replace whatever this illness is that you've got. I just take that, and here's the illness. And I just take that peace or the love or the joy or whatever it is, and I just cover it. And I say it overrides the negativity that's in that thing. And generally it's going to be attached to some sort of an emotion, because it's a physical issue is attached to the emotion. So let's say, I do believe that arthritis, one of the emotional roots, has to do with bitterness. So if we're dealing with arthritis, and then I might say, okay, then I know that there's some bitterness that's attached to that. Where am I bitter in my life? And then, you have to learn to be honest with yourself and say, okay, where is that? And then look at the things that you were traumatized by that caused you to be bitter. Where in myself, it wasn't arthritis, it was the chronic fatigue type thing. And I had to go look at it. And if you sign up for my newsletter, you're going to get an emotional roots of the physical symptoms somewhere along the line for free. In the first month, you'll get it in one of those emails. And it's got some of the major illnesses. So I had to take the opposite of that negative thing and every day pound it with the opposite thing that was a stronger frequency. And I did it through music. I got myself into a place of joy. I got myself into a place of love and peace and stayed in that place, and then hammered this negative thing, like throwing love bombs at it, throwing peace bombs, throwing joy bombs or whatever, to retrain my entire system that when that negative thing came at me, there was no longer a negative trigger. And it was about 7 years of me hammering at this before one day I realized, wait, chronic fatigue, where is it? It's gone. And as I was saying to someone earlier today, I am healthier now than I have been in 40 years. And I do believe it's because I learned the power of my words. If we really think carefully about what comes flying out of our mouth and stop the negativity before it actually comes out, then go and look and see, okay, what made me want to say that? Go look at the emotional thing that it's attached to it and deal with that. Then more love is going to flow from us. And then we're actually going to be physically, emotionally, and spiritually more healthy. So to answer questions that people ask me, find some music, instrumental music that makes you feel at peace or rest or wherever emotion, positive emotion you want. You take the negative thing, you get in that meditative state, which is just being at rest. That's what it is. And allowing yourself to be and not strive to do anything. Then you take the love or the joy or the peace or whatever it is, and you just cover that negative thing. Own the behavior of it, because I think that's important. Then say, I choose to just let this go and replace it with something. Now, trust me, it's going to take a lot of doing it over and over. Every time that negative trigger comes, you just do it again. The negative trigger comes again, and then replace it. You just keep hammering at that thing. Because remember, it takes our system a long time to practice certain behaviors, which end up with words that come out of our mouths to mirror the behavior that's built inside ourselves. So hopefully that will help you. I will put the Reprogramming the DNA article below, as well as a couple of other blog posts that might help you understand the importance and the power of our words. And again, you're going to see all of that presented to us every day. What do we want to line up with? If we don't want negative stuff on our lives, to manifest in our physical or emotional selves, then we got to get rid of that stuff and not let it come in. And we have to allow other things. What we put our eyes to, what we put our ears to, what we put our thoughts to, become habits in our lives. And then eventually that finds its way out through words, which is an action that we participate with. So hopefully that helped the people that have been asking questions about words and how we can change our physical bodies. So have fun, read some things, listen to some great music, and then take your intent of reversing all the negativity with something that's more positive, and you will see change in your life. Thank you.